I would like to talk about opportunity cost and a more clear way of defining it compared to a lot of the definitions you see online and in textbooks. So basically, opportunity cost is about the allocation of a scarce resource. And by scarce resource, this could be money, but it also could be time, it could be energy, it could be rooms in a building, it could be staff members and the staff members' time. So it's a decision about a scarce resource. And this is where you rank the different ways of using that scarce resource. How are you going to allocate it? How are you going to best put it to use? And the opportunity cost, of course, is going to be the second best use of that resource, where in order to choose the first best, you have the second best option that you have to give up in order to devote the resource to the first best option. So that's opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost is the actual value, the utility of that second best option to the person. Now, given that this opportunity cost is never actually realized, since you never actually do put the money toward this or the time toward this, you might ask the question, why does it matter? And one of the reasons this matters is because if you're going to figure out how important or how good this first best way of using the scarce resources is, you need to beat out that second best option. So you need to be at least as good, if not better, than that second best option. So one reason this matters is because if you are putting together an option that is the first best choice for someone to try to attract funders, to try to attract employees, to try to attract volunteers toward your organization, you need to know, what are you competing with? What is the next best option that these people have? So as an employer, you might say, okay, we're trying to attract people to work in the lunch line. For those people, what is their next best option? Is it to stay home with their kids? Is it to go work at the local department store? Is it to spend time caring for their families? And we need to make sure that we're paying them enough such that working for us, with all of the joys and all of the pains that go along with working for us, in net, the value from working for us beats out the next best option. And this is actually why this is entered onto the books as a real cost, because you need to know, okay, what is the cost of beating out the next best option for these people? Similarly, opportunity cost is part of the profit structure when you try to figure out how much profit does a company need to make. And the reason we have that is because the person who owns the company, who perhaps puts a lot of their own sweat and blood and tears into the company, they have an opportunity cost for allocating their ownership of the company, whatever that means to them. For some people, their ownership of the company means their time investment in the company, in which case, if we're talking about the time investment of the owners of a sole proprietor business, one of the opportunity costs might be going to work for the corporate sector. So maybe they could make $100,000 working for the corporate sector. If this company and the profits of this company are not compensating them so that it's better for them to own the company than go to that next best corporate job. If that's true, we need to be paying them at least $100,000 in profits of the company. That needs to be entered onto the books if we're actually going to keep the company running. Otherwise, the owner of the company is going to say, it's no longer worth my time and effort to own this company. I'm taking my labor elsewhere. The company no longer exists. Now, of course, it's all about value. So maybe the owner of that particular company hates the corporate sector. They find it soul-sucking. So maybe you could actually get away with paying them $80,000 in profit rather than the $100,000 they could make at their next best job option, just because they hate that next best job option. And when you factor in the hate into this opportunity cost, that kind of lowers the total value of the thing you're having to compete with, such that you can beat them out with the lifestyle of being a sole proprietor owner and an $80,000 salary. Maybe that just beats out the $100,000 job in a soul-sucking company. So this really is about value. It's not just about dollar amounts, but we do have to enter that as a dollar amount on the books sometimes, because that tells us how much we need to pay people to make our company worth their time. And you could imagine as well, some owners of small businesses have a next best opportunity of staying home with their family or undertaking a creative endeavor. So all of these other squishy types of value can make up the opportunity cost. Okay, now we want to look at a graph of opportunity cost as it would appear in an economic model to get behind what is the intuition of this increasing marginal cost shape of the opportunity cost graph. And we're thinking of this as time that you're choosing to devote to piano practice as a college student. So what you basically do here is you think about, for every half hour that you practice, what exactly are you giving up in your life? And you might think, okay, the first half hour you practice, you're probably giving up something of very little value, like surfing the web. So on the vertical axis, the opportunity cost, we have the value to you of surfing the web. Now, the next half hour, you might need to give up a TV show that you kind of like watching, so it's more valuable than surfing the web, but it's not the most valuable thing in your life. Now, if you practice an hour and a half a week, you might need to give up a little bit of socializing with friends. And if you practice another half hour, you might need to give up a half hour that you would have spent at the gym. And so maybe the next half hour you have to give up something more important than the gym, like studying your economics. And then if you give up studying economics for half an hour, maybe you have to give up half an hour of eating, where instead of having a leisurely meal, you're having to scarf things down. So the point here is that every half hour you add playing the piano, you're going to be giving up something more and more valuable in your life. And the value of that stuff increases exponentially. Because if we think about there being a limited number of hours in the day, where there's some hours of over here that's 24 hours. And so as you get closer and closer to 24 hours, you're giving up sleep, you're giving up eating, you're giving up things that are absolutely vital to your survival. And the value of those things, the value of giving up that time, is incredibly essential. It's sort of your lifeblood stuff. But as you move into this range, you're giving up pretty valuable stuff, like time with friends you care about, time with family, your weekly phone call with your parents. So basically, if you order every half hour of your life in order of least important to most important, what you'll find is that there's some stuff that is super, super important, and then there's a chunk of time that's actually not that important. And when you line up the actual value to you, those are going to look like an increasing marginal cost curve because of the super importance of these half hours and the minor importance of these half hours. So that's opportunity cost. That's why it has this increasing marginal cost shape. It's a super useful concept in economics when you're thinking about how much time do you devote to something. Now, for money, for financial investments, it's going to have the same feature, because what's the next best place you could invest that money? It'll just have a similar shape to this if you walk through that exercise. Now, I would like to make a case for this particular definition of opportunity cost, because a lot of the definitions you'll find are incredibly vague. Like, let me read you a couple. These are just two from Investotopia. Opportunity cost is the foregone benefit that would have been derived from an option not chosen. And another one is opportunity cost represents the potential benefits an individual, investor, or business misses out on when choosing one alternative over another. That language is vague and confusing, and a lot of times I'll see students using this term incorrectly. So if you find a student using the term incorrectly and try to give them a definition like that, they're probably just going to be more confused. What I'm going to recommend if you hear someone using this term incorrectly is that you ask them, what is the scarce resource that you're trying to allocate in this decision? Is it money? Is it effort? Is it time? Is it FTE or employee hours? Give them some options that it might be. And then ask them, what's the first best and second best way of allocating that scarce resource? And once they've answered those two questions, they're going to be way more in line with the actual meaning of opportunity cost than if you confuse them by giving them a vague definition. So this is just my minor rant about opportunity cost and the way it is taught. I do think it's important to recognize that this has to do with allocation of scarce resources, and we need to frame this concept in that way.